This next question is for Jerry. Do you have any insights on the Koch brothers' thinking about climate and energy policy?
Oh, yeah.
Long answer.
I should probably just leave it at that. But no, look, one of the things that's very interesting is if you look at the oil and gas industry as a whole, you'll find the major vertically integrated corporations like BP, ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, ad infinitum, all state publicly climate change is happening. It demands a policy response. Carbon pricing is the right answer. They are already there, at least for advertisement purposes. Now, thus far, they have not done much to forward those arguments beyond putting up a good website and offering some good statements in the press, occasionally joint letters. Now, let's not minimize that. That's still something. You've got the biggest actors in the fossil fuel industry acknowledging something that nobody on the Republican stage could acknowledge in this entire political campaign, which is that climate change is real. It's something that is serious. It demands a response, and the carbon pricing is the right response. Now, the reason they feel that way might be because they fear the consequences of not saying this, because politically right now they're under the gun from the attorneys generals now for tobacco-like accusations that they have been covering up information. They're being hammered by a guerrilla war now over infrastructural investments that cost them Keystone Pipeline. It's stopping at a coal export facility on the West Coast, and virtually everything else of consequence is now subject to citizen action, which in the long run they know they can't win. They don't like EPA regulations, and if you're going to get rid of them, you can't do it through brute political force out of the right, so you need to come up with something better. Perhaps carbon pricing is that better answer. And if you were able to use the revenues from a carbon tax to, say, cut corporate income taxes, studies I've seen from economists who do that sort of work show that the oil and gas industry makes out like bandits. I mean, it's just a tremendous trade for them. So there's a lot of reasons why people in the oil and gas sector, there's probably a combination of all of the above for many of those actors. Now, Charles and David Koch at Koch Industries is a little bit different story. They're not like other actors in the corporate arena in oil and gas. The main reason they're not is that they are deeply ideological characters. They come from the world I come from. They are hardline libertarians. I'm not quite as hardline as I used to be, but I understand that world very well because for most of my career at Cato, I too was a pretty hardline libertarian. And for hardline libertarians, acknowledging climate change is real, even though that should have nothing to do with how you feel about libertarianism, right? That's atmospheric physics and the role of government, two entirely separate matters. But libertarians have been married to the hard right of the GOP for so long, again, like Mark's analogy about marriage, or metaphor about marriage. When you marry somebody, oftentimes you start taking on their characteristics and acting kind of like them, and all that bleeds, you bleeds into them and they bleed into you. Well, it's the same way with a libertarian marriage to the hard right. Conservatives aren't libertarians, but they've been partners for so long they start acting like one another. And so for Charles and David Koch, I think they honestly and deeply believe that climate change is just one out of a list of 10 or 12 examples of environmentalists crying wolf. And they point to Naomi Klein's book and then other things and say, see, this is really about destroying capitalism. This is all about remaking the human species. This is all about getting us to turn away from everything that made the Industrial Revolution great. This is the real agenda of these people, and I would far rather roll my dice and keep this great engine of wealth creation, which is the free market, than go down that road. They will never leave that position, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I mean, I changed my mind. Maybe Charles could change his. But when you're in your 80s, that kind of stops happening, you know. So while I know a lot of friends of mine on the left, they'll see something that Charles says in the Washington Post, says, hey, he says climate change is happening. Isn't that something? He says, you know, maybe we need a response. Well, that's the response of my people at Cato. They'll acknowledge climate change is happening. They just don't think it's going to be that big a deal, and the cost of doing something will be greater than the benefits. And oh, by the way, they're going to try to smuggle in socialism to destroy the market while they're in the course of doing so. It's not really that big a concession.
All right.